The hammer struck the anvil with a force that sent sparks flying into the dusty Arizona air, and Sarah Mitchell knew her palms were bleeding again beneath the leather gloves that had worn through 2 days ago. It was July of 1882, and the forge in Tombstone burned hotter than the desert sun beating down on the tin roof of her father's blacksmith shop. Sarah had been working since dawn, her 20th birthday just 3 weeks behind her, forging horseshoes for the endless stream of cowboys and miners who needed their horses shod before heading out into the unforgiving landscape. Her father lay in bed upstairs, his leg shattered from a wagon accident 2 months prior, and the responsibility of keeping the business alive had fallen entirely on her shoulders. She plunged the glowing metal into the water barrel, and the hiss of steam rose up to mingle with the heat that made her cotton work dress cling to her back. When she pulled off what remained of her gloves to examine the damage, she winced at the sight of her palms. Blisters had formed on top of older blisters, some burst and weeping, others filled with fluid that made gripping the hammer an exercise in willpower. Her hands shook as she reached for the next piece of iron, but there were still 7 more shoes to forge before sunset, and the Callahan Ranch needed them by morning. The door of the shop swung open, bringing with it a blast of afternoon heat and the silhouette of a man leading a dusty roan mare. Sarah squinted against the brightness, making out the shape of broad shoulders, a worn leather vest, and a hat that had seen better days. As her eyes adjusted, she found herself looking at a man perhaps 25 years old, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water after spring rain. "Need 4 shoes for my mares," he said, his voice quiet but carrying easily over the dying hiss of steam. "Heard you do good work." Sarah wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, leaving a smudge of soot. "I do, but I have 7 shoes to finish for the Callahan order first. You could come back tomorrow afternoon." The cowboy stepped closer, leading his horse to the hitching post inside the shop, and that was when he saw her hands. His expression changed immediately, concern replacing the neutral politeness of a customer conducting business. "Ma'am, your hands are torn up something fierce." She curled her fingers instinctively, hiding the worst of the damage. "They are fine. I have work to do." "Those are not fine." He tied his horse and crossed the space between them before she could protest. "When did you last wrap those properly?" "I do not have time for wrapping. The Callahans need their order. And after that I have your shoes, and tomorrow there will be more work. My father cannot do it, so I must." The words came out sharper than she intended, frustration and pain making her voice hard. The cowboy studied her for a long moment, then removed his hat and set it on the workbench. "Name is Jacob Tanner. I have some experience with metalwork from my time working a ranch up in Colorado. If you tell me what needs doing, I can help you finish those 7 shoes, then you can rest those hands, at least long enough for me to wrap them proper." Sarah opened her mouth to refuse, pride and independence warring with the throbbing agony in her palms, and the exhaustion that made her bones feel like lead. "I cannot pay you for helping." "Did not ask for pay?" Jacob rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a few old scars. "Just seems like the right thing to do." Something in his steady gaze made her believe him, and the relief that flooded through her at the thought of even a few minutes' respite was enough to overcome her stubborn streak. "The Callahans need shoes for their draft horses, bigger than standard. I have 3 more to shape and 4 that need finishing work." Jacob nodded and moved to the forge, examining the setup with the eye of someone who understood the craft. "You have the fire running good and hot. Show me how you want them shaped, and I will follow your lead." For the next several minutes, Sarah directed him through the process, surprised by how quickly he picked up the rhythm she preferred. His hammer strikes were confident and sure, his hands steady on the tongs. He did not have the precision of a trained blacksmith, but he had strength and a willingness to listen, which counted for more than natural talent when it came to honest work. "You really did work a forge before," Sarah said, watching him turn a shoe with practiced ease. Some. Mostly I am better with horses than iron, but a man picks up what he needs to know out here." He plunged the metal into the water, then examined it critically. This one needs more work on the left side. See how it is not quite even? She stepped closer to look, and he was right. The attention to detail impressed her. Too many men would have called it good enough and moved on. Yes, a few more strikes on the outside curve. They fell into a rhythm together, Sarah calling out adjustments and occasionally demonstrating a technique while Jacob provided the muscle that her exhausted body could no longer supply. The sun tracked across the sky, its light shifting through the open door, and the pile of completed horseshoes grew steadily. Sarah found herself studying him when he was focused on the work, noting the concentration in his expression, the careful way he handled the hot metal, the occasional glance he shot her way as if checking whether she had collapsed yet. When the seventh shoe cooled and joined its companions, Jacob set down the hammer and stretched his shoulders. There. That is the Callahan order done. Now where do you keep bandages? I appreciate your help, but I can manage from here. Sarah moved toward the completed shoes, intending to start the finishing work, but her legs chose that moment to remind her that she had been standing for 13 hours straight. She stumbled, catching herself against the workbench. Jacob was beside her in an instant, his hand gentle on her elbow. Sit down before you fall down, please. The please did it. Sarah let him guide her to the wooden stool her father usually occupied, her body sagging with relief once she was off her feet. The shop seemed to tilt slightly, exhaustion catching up with her all at once. Bandages? Jacob prompted again. There is a box on the shelf behind you. Clean cloth, some salve that the doctor left for my father. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Jacob retrieved the box and knelt in front of her, taking one of her hands with a gentleness that surprised her given the strength she had watched him wield the hammer with. Up close, she could see that his eyes were not just one color, but a mix of green and gray, and there were small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled more than he frowned. This is going to hurt, he warned, opening a jar of salve that smelled of comfrey and honey. The first touch of the medicine against her raw skin made her hiss through her teeth, but Jacob's hands remained steady, working with the same careful attention he had given the horseshoes. He cleaned each blister gently, applied the salve with feather-light touches, then wrapped her palms in clean white cloth with surprising skill. Where did you learn to do this? Sarah asked, watching his bent head as he worked. Had a little sister who was always getting into scrapes. Mama taught me to tend injuries before she passed. A shadow crossed his face, there and gone. That, and you work cattle long enough, you learn to patch up whatever needs patching. I am sorry about your mother. Was a long time ago. He finished wrapping her right hand and started on the left. Your father, you said he broke his leg? Wagon wheel came loose, he fell bad, and the wagon rolled over his shin. Doctor says he will walk again, but it will be months before he can stand at the forge. Sarah looked at her bandaged hand, flexing her fingers experimentally. The wrapping was firm without being too tight, providing support without cutting off circulation. We cannot afford to close the shop. This business is all we have. Jacob tied off the second bandage and sat back on his heels. You've been doing this alone for 2 months? There is no one else. My mother died when I was 12. No brothers or sisters, just me and Pa. She met his eyes directly. I know what people think. That this is not women's work. That I should have gotten married already and let some husband take care of things. But Pa taught me the trade, and I am good at it. I am not going to let his life's work die just because I am a woman. I watched you work, Jacob said quietly. You are better than good. Those shoes you made are as fine as any I have seen, better than most. He stood and dusted off his knees. But even the strongest person cannot keep up this pace forever. You are going to break yourself. What choice do I have? The words came out sharper than she intended, frustration boiling over. Tell me what else I should do, and I will do it. But there is no money to hire help, and no one in this town who would work for a woman blacksmith anyway. Jacob was quiet for a moment, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Then he said, "Let me help. I told you, I cannot pay anyone. I am not asking for pay." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "Hear me out. I am between jobs right now. Just got back from a cattle drive to Dodge City, and I am not due to join up with the next drive for 3 weeks. My mare needs shoes anyway, and I could use a place to stay that is not the boarding house. If you let me help with the forge work, I can make my own shoes and give your hands time to heal. Few days, maybe a week, no wages required." Sarah stared at him, trying to find the angle, the catch. Men did not offer help for nothing, not in her experience. "Why would you do that?" "Because you need help, and I can provide it, and because—" He paused, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I got to look at your account book when I set my hat down. You do good business, plenty of work, but you are one person trying to do the job of two, and that is not sustainable. Maybe I'm just hoping that if I help you out now, you will remember me kindly when I need my mare shod in the future." It was a practical reason, the kind of mutually beneficial arrangement that made sense in a place like Tombstone, where survival often depended on building networks of goodwill. Sarah knew she should be suspicious, should send him away and figure things out on her own, as she always had. But her hands throbbed despite the bandages, her body ached with exhaustion, and the thought of having someone competent to share the load was so tempting it made her chest tight. 3 days, she heard herself say. "You can help for 3 days. There is a cot in the back room where you can sleep, and I will feed you breakfast and dinner. After that, we call it even." Jacob's smile broadened, transforming his face. 3 days, that is a start. He extended his hand for a shake, then seemed to remember her bandages and dropped it with a sheepish look. "Sorry, habit." Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling back. "We will shake on it when my hands are healed." The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of the forge already crackling to life. She bolted upright in her bed, morning light streaming through the window, and realized with shock that the sun was already well above the horizon. She had slept past dawn for the first time in 2 months. She dressed quickly, fumbling with buttons using her bandaged hands, and rushed downstairs to find Jacob already at work. He had the fire burning at the perfect temperature and was examining the list of orders she kept tacked to the wall. "You should have woken me," she said, slightly breathless from her rush down the stairs. Jacob looked up from the list. "You needed sleep, and I figured I could get started on the simpler work while you checked on your father." He gestured to the forge. "I hope I did not overstep by starting the fire." Sarah felt off balance, unused to someone else taking initiative in her space. "No, it is Haikakatsia. Thank you. I do need to check on Pa. He will be wondering where his breakfast is." "Already handled. I made extra when I cooked my own, and I took a plate up to him about an hour ago. He seemed surprised to see me, but I explained the arrangement. Hope that was all right." She stared at him, trying to process the fact that someone had not only started her fire and reviewed her orders, but also fed her father. "You cooked? Nothing fancy, just eggs and bacon. Your hen house had plenty of eggs, and I saw the bacon in the cold box." He turned back to the forge, checking the temperature of the coals. "Your pa seems like good people. We had a nice talk." Sarah realized her mouth was hanging open and closed it. "I should go see him." Her father was sitting up in bed when she entered his room, his splinted leg propped on pillows and a satisfied expression on his weathered face. Thomas Mitchell had been a blacksmith for 40 years, and the forced inactivity of his recovery was clearly wearing on him, but this morning he looked more cheerful than she had seen him in weeks. "That young man says he is helping you for a few days," Thomas said without preamble. "Seems capable." "He is. He helped me finish the Callahan order yesterday." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, letting her father examine her bandaged hands. "You should have wrapped these days ago, girl." "I was too busy keeping your business running." Thomas's expression softened. "I know. And I hate that you have had to bear this burden alone. I am proud of you, Sarah. You know that, right? What you have done these past months, taking on the forge full time, it is more than I ever should have asked of you." "You did not ask. I chose this." She squeezed his hand carefully. And I will keep choosing it because this shop matters. The work matters. The work does matter, but so do you. Her father nodded toward the door. If that cowboy wants to help for a few days, let him. Rest your hands, rest yourself. The business will still be here when you are healed. Sarah spent the morning working alongside Jacob, showing him the specific requirements of each order and watching to make sure his work met her standards. She found herself surprised by how quickly he learned, how he remembered details she only mentioned once, how he asked intelligent questions about techniques she had developed over years of practice. Around midday, Maria Rodriguez from the boarding house stopped by with a basket covered in cloth. She was a widow in her 40s who ran the best kitchen in Tombstone, and she had been a friend of Sarah's mother. "I heard you have help," Maria said, eyeing Jacob with open curiosity as he worked the bellows. "The whole town is talking about the cowboy staying at the blacksmith shop." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "He is just helping for a few days while my hands heal. There is nothing to talk about." "Mm-hmm." Maria's eyes twinkled. "I brought you some proper food. You have been living on bread and cheese for weeks, and you are starting to look like a strong wind would blow you away." She uncovered the basket to reveal fresh tortillas, beef stew still warm from the pot, and a cloth bag of dried apples. "Make sure you both eat. That man looks like he could use a good meal too." After Maria left, carrying with her the promise to spread her observations all over town, Sarah and Jacob sat outside in the shade to eat. The stew was rich and savory, and Sarah realized Maria was right. She had been eating poorly, grabbing whatever was quickest between jobs. "She seems nice," Jacob said, sopping up stew with a tortilla. "Maria is wonderful. She looked after me when my mother died. Made sure Pa and I did not starve while we figured out how to run a household without her." Sarah watched a dust devil spin down the street. "In a place like this, you need people you can count on." "What about friends your own age? Other young women?" Sarah laughed, but there was little humor in it. "Most girls my age are married with children already. And the ones who are not, their mothers do not want them associating with someone like me. A woman who works in a forge, who smells like smoke and horse sweat, who is more comfortable with a hammer than a needle. I am not exactly proper company." Jacob was quiet for a moment, then said, "Their loss." Something in the simple certainty of his tone made her look at him. He was not looking at her, but at the mountains in the distance, and she found herself studying his profile. He had a strong jaw, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and that same calm steadiness that had struck her yesterday. "What about you?" she asked. "You said you just came back from a cattle drive. Is that what you normally do, drive cattle?" "Mostly. I have been working ranches since I was 15, started out in Colorado, but after my ma died and my sister got married, there was nothing keeping me there. I have been moving around the past few years, going where the work is, cattle drives, ranch hand jobs, breaking horses for the army a few times." He finished his stew and set the bowl aside. "It is a good life mostly, but it is lonely sometimes." "I imagine it would be. Always moving, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots." "There is freedom in it too, though, getting to see new places, meet new people, not being tied down to one spot." He glanced at her. "But I suppose you would not understand that. Being settled here." "I might understand it more than you think." Sarah wrapped her arms around her knees. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just leave. To see somewhere that is not dust and heat and the same faces every day. But then I think about Pa, about the shop, and I know I cannot go anywhere. This is where I am needed." "That is not the same as where you want to be, though." The observation was too accurate, hitting a nerve Sarah usually kept well protected. Wanting does not matter much when you have responsibilities. It should matter. Jacob stood and offered her a hand up, careful of her bandages. Even if it cannot change what you do, what you want should still matter. They spent the afternoon working through the order queue, and Sarah found herself relaxing into the rhythm of having a partner at the forge. Jacob handled the heavy striking while she did the detail work, their movements becoming synchronized without conscious effort. When customers came in, Sarah managed the transactions while Jacob continued working, and she noticed how several of the regular clients gave him curious looks but seemed satisfied with the quality of the work. Old Pete Harrison, who ran the livery stable, stayed longer than necessary after picking up his order. Heard Tom had an accident, he said, watching Jacob shape a bar shoe. Glad to see you got some help, Sarah girl. This is too much work for one person. Jacob is just helping temporarily, Sarah said, counting out Pete's change. Temporarily can turn into permanently if things work out right. Pete winked at her. Young man like that, hard-working, good with his hands, could be you have found yourself more than just a helper. Pete Harrison, do not start spreading gossip. But Sarah could not stop the flush creeping up her neck. Not gossip, just observation. Pete tipped his hat to them both and ambled out, no doubt heading straight for the saloon to share his observations with anyone who would listen. Jacob looked up from his work. Is he always that subtle? That was subtle for Pete. Sarah shook her head. This town has too few people and too much free time. Everyone is always in everyone else's business. Does it bother you? People talking? It would bother me more if I let it change how I live my life. People have been talking about me since I was 16 and declared I wanted to be a blacksmith. I learned to ignore it. She examined the shoe Jacob had just finished. This is good work. You're getting better fast. I have a good teacher. The compliment was straightforward, without any of the false flattery some men used, and it made Sarah smile despite herself. We make a decent team. We do. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition that felt like the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. Sarah looked away first, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how easy it would be to lean just a little closer. I should check the fire, she said, moving away toward the forge. That evening, after the shop was closed and they had eaten the leftovers from Maria's stew, Sarah found herself lingering downstairs instead of retreating to her room as she usually did. Jacob sat on a barrel outside the shop, looking at the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and after a moment's hesitation, Sarah joined him. My hands already feel better, she said, flexing her fingers in their bandages. Thank you for that. And for today. For all of it. You are welcome. Jacob's voice was quiet in the evening air. It felt good having something useful to do. I appreciate you trusting me enough to let me help. Trust is not something I give easily. I noticed. He smiled slightly, but I'm glad you took a chance. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the first stars began to emerge. The desert cooled quickly after dark, and Sarah found herself shivering slightly in her thin dress. Without a word, Jacob shrugged out of his vest and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like leather and wood smoke. You do not have to do that, Sarah protested weakly. I know, I wanted to. She pulled the vest tighter around herself, touched by the simple gesture. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you really helping me? And do not say it is just because you needed your mare shod. You could have taken her to any blacksmith in Arizona. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the stars. Honest answer. Honest answer. When I walked into your shop yesterday and saw you standing there, covered in soot and sweat with your hands bleeding and your eyes full of determination to keep going no matter what, something in my chest just shifted. I have been drifting for years, going from job to job, never finding a reason to stay anywhere, and then I saw you and I thought maybe I had just found a reason. He looked at her then, his expression open and vulnerable. Maybe that makes me a fool, feeling something for a woman I just met. But I learned a long time ago that life is too short and too hard out here to ignore it when you find something worth paying attention to. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such direct honesty about feelings that most people wrapped in layers of propriety and game playing. You do not even know me. Maybe not, but I would like to, if you would let me. She should say no, should protect herself from the inevitable hurt when he left at the end of 3 days and went back to his drifting life. But looking at him in the starlight, seeing the hope and uncertainty in his eyes, she found herself saying, I would like that too. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Yeah? Yeah. She smiled back, feeling something unfurl in her chest that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it was there. But Jacob, if you're going to stay, even just for a few days, I need to know you are serious. I cannot afford to lose my focus on the shop, and I cannot afford to get my heart broken. I am serious, as serious as I have ever been about anything. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he took her bandaged hand gently in his. I know 3 days is not long, but maybe we can see where those 3 days lead. No promises about forever, because life does not give us those. Just a promise to be honest with each other and see what develops. It was more than anyone had ever offered her, and less than she wanted, but it was real and truthful and enough for now. All right, we will see where it goes. They sat together until the temperature dropped enough to drive them inside, and when Sarah finally climbed the stairs to her room, she found herself unable to stop smiling. Her hands still hurt. Her body was still exhausted, and tomorrow would bring another long day of work. But for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt like she was not facing everything alone. The next 2 days passed in a blur of work and conversation, hammering metal and stealing glances when they thought the other was not looking. Jacob proved himself again and again, his skill at the forge improving rapidly under Sarah's guidance. They developed a shorthand communication, a gesture or a glance enough to convey what was needed. And in the brief moments between customers and orders, they talked. Sarah learned that Jacob had been born in Colorado to parents who had moved west looking for opportunity. His father had died when he was 12, leaving his mother to raise him and his younger sister alone. He had started working young to help support the family, taking any job that paid, and he had discovered a natural talent with horses that had led him into ranch work. My sister Anna married a good man, a farmer with land near Denver, Jacob told her while they waited for iron to heat. She has 3 kids now. I get letters from her sometimes when I stay in one place long enough for mail to catch up with me. She's always trying to convince me to settle down, find a nice girl, start a family. Why have you not? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Never found the right reason. Or the right girl. He looked at her meaningfully. Until maybe now. She ducked her head to hide her pleased smile. You do not waste time, do you? Life is too short for wasting time. In turn, Sarah told him about growing up in the shop, how her father had started teaching her the trade when she was 8 and showed an interest. Her mother had been worried it was not appropriate, but her father had been adamant that Sarah should learn something practical that could support her if anything ever happened to him. He never expected it would happen so soon, Sarah said, watching the coals glow. Mama got sick fast. Pneumonia. She was gone in less than a week. After that, it was just Pa and me in the forge. The work was the only thing that made sense when everything else felt like it was falling apart. I understand that, Jacob said quietly. Work can be a lifeline when you're drowning. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Sarah unwrapped her hands to find the blisters healing cleanly. The skin was still tender, but the angry redness had faded, and the pain had diminished to a manageable ache. She could grip a hammer again without wanting to cry. They look much better, Jacob said, examining her palms with the careful attention that had become familiar. But you should still take it easy for another day or 2. Let them finish healing. Our agreement was 3 days. Today is the 3rd day. Sarah tried to keep her voice neutral, but she heard the tremor in it that gave away how much she did not want him to leave. Jacob heard it too. Agreements can be renegotiated. Can they? If both parties are willing. He still held her hands, his thumbs resting gently on her wrists where her pulse jumped. I have been thinking, you still need help, not just for a few more days, but ongoing. The amount of work coming through this shop, it is too much for one person to handle sustainably, even when your hands are fully healed, and I still do not have anywhere I need to be for 2 more weeks. Hope flared bright and dangerous in Sarah's chest. What are you suggesting? Let me stay. Keep helping. We can work out a proper arrangement. I will do the heavy forging, you do the detail work and run the business side. We split the profits fair, And I can pay you rent for the room. I thought you said you were between jobs, that you had another cattle drive to join. Jacob took a deep breath. I could send word that I'm not coming. There are plenty of cowboys looking for work. They would not miss me. But you would be giving up the work you know, the life you have built. Maybe it is time for a change. Maybe I'm tired of drifting. He squeezed her hands gently. And maybe I found something here that matters more than keeping to old patterns. Sarah's throat felt tight. You barely know me, Jacob. What if you stay and you realize this is not what you want? That I am not what you want? What if I stay and find out this is exactly what I've been looking for? He stepped closer. I know it is fast. I know 3 days is not long enough to be sure about anything, but I also know that I have never felt this way before. Like I found the place I'm supposed to be. And if you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling, then I think we owe it to ourselves to find out what this could be. I feel it, Sarah admitted, the words barely above a whisper, and I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time in years, like the weight I have been carrying alone just became lighter because you are helping me hold it up. And that terrifies me because what happens when you change your mind and leave? Then we deal with that if it comes. But Sarah, you cannot live your whole life afraid of things that might happen. Sometimes you have to take a chance on something good. He lifted one of her hands to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. I am asking you to take a chance on me, on us. Just see where this goes. She searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or insincerity, but found only hope and determination and something that looked an awful lot like the feelings tangled up in her own chest. If you stay, I need you to understand something. The shop comes first, always. My father's livelihood, our future, it all depends on this business succeeding. I cannot let anything, not even this, jeopardize that. I would not ask you to. The shop comes first. We work together to make it thrive. And whatever develops between us, it builds on that foundation, not in spite of it. He smiled slightly. Besides, I am not interested in taking you away from your work. I like watching you create. You are beautiful when you are forging. Did you know that? Completely in your element, strong and skilled and absolutely certain of what you are doing. No one had ever called her beautiful while covered in soot and sweat, and the compliment settled warm and bright under her ribs. You really want to do this? Give up cattle driving, stay here in Tombstone, work a forge instead of riding the range? I really want to do this. I want to wake up tomorrow and work beside you. I want to learn everything you can teach me about smithing. I want to have dinner with you and your father and hear stories about the business. I want to see where this leads. He paused, then added with careful vulnerability, I want you, Sarah, not just for 3 days or 2 weeks, but for however long you will have me. She kissed him then, rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his before she could overthink it or talk herself out of it. His surprise lasted only a moment before he responded, one hand coming up to cup her face while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. He kissed her like she was precious, like he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. And Sarah felt something inside her that had been locked and guarded for years finally break open. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. I am going to take that as a yes. Sarah laughed, breathless and happy. Yes, stay. We will try this. See what happens. Thank you. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise more than a passion. You will not regret it. I better not, Cowboy, because if you break my heart, I have access to very hot metal and very heavy hammers. His laugh rumbled through his chest, duly noted and appropriately feared. They stood there in the forge, wrapped in each other's arms, while the afternoon light slanted through the windows and the smell of coal smoke hung in the air, and Sarah thought that maybe, just maybe, taking a chance on something good was exactly what she needed. That evening, They told her father about the new arrangement. Thomas listened carefully as Jacob laid out his proposal, a proper business partnership with clear terms and fair compensation. When Jacob finished, Thomas looked at his daughter with raised eyebrows. "What do you think, Sarah girl? This is your decision." "I think it makes good business sense. We have more work than I can handle alone, and Jacob has proven himself capable." She glanced at Jacob. "And I trust him." Trust is the foundation of any good partnership. Thomas extended his hand to Jacob. "Welcome aboard, son, but I'm going to say something as her father, not as a businessman. If you hurt my daughter, broken leg or no broken leg, I will find a way to make you regret it." Jacob shook his hand firmly. "You have my word, sir. I have no intention of hurting her." "Good. Then we understand each other." Thomas smiled. "Now, someone want to help me downstairs? If we are celebrating a new partnership, I want to be part of it properly, not stuck up here in this bed." They spent the evening together, the three of them, eating the meal Sarah had prepared and talking about plans for the shop. Thomas shared stories about the early days of the business when he first came to Tombstone and built the forge from nothing. Jacob talked about his experiences on various ranches and the different techniques he had seen used in other parts of the territory, and Sarah, sitting between the two men who mattered most in her world now, felt a contentment she had not known was possible. Later, after they had helped Thomas back upstairs and the shop was quiet, Sarah and Jacob stood together outside under the stars again. "Your father is a good man," Jacob said. "He is. And he likes you. That matters. I like him too. And I meant what I said. I will take care of you both. This partnership, the shop, making sure everything succeeds. You can count on me." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, tired but happy. "I believe you." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm in the blacksmith shop. Jacob moved his few possessions into the back room and made it his own with the simple additions of a clean blanket and his saddlebags hung on a peg. He sent word to the trail boss who had been expecting him that he would not be joining the next cattle drive, and if the decision caused him any regret, he never showed it. Working together daily, Sarah and Jacob developed an even smoother partnership at the forge. They could anticipate each other's needs with barely a word, moving around the small space like dancers who had practiced their steps for years rather than weeks. Orders were completed faster and with better quality than when Sarah had been working alone, and word spread that the Mitchell Forge was back to full strength. Business picked up accordingly. Ranchers from miles around brought their horses for shoeing. Miners needed tools repaired and created. The local freight company contracted them to maintain their wagon wheels and hardware. Sarah found herself actually having to turn away some work, scheduling jobs days in advance, instead of desperately accepting everything that came through the door. "This is what it should feel like," Thomas said one evening, watching them from his chair as he continued his recovery. He was on crutches now, able to get around slowly but not yet strong enough to return to the physical demands of the forge. "A proper smithy with proper help. I should have hired an apprentice years ago." "Jacob is more than an apprentice," Sarah said, catching Jacob's eye across the shop. "He is a partner." "That he is." The partnership extended beyond the forge as well. Jacob took over much of the heavy lifting that the business required, hauling iron stock and coal, managing the more difficult horses that came in for shoeing. But he also brought new skills to the operation. His talent with horses meant that animals who might have been fractious for Sarah stood calm for him, and several customers specifically requested that Jacob handle their more temperamental mounts. "You have a gift," Sarah told him one afternoon after watching him gentle a nervous stallion that had nearly kicked her the day before. "That horse would have taken my head off if he could have reached me." Jacob stroked the stallion's nose. "Horses just need to know you are not going to hurt them. Once they trust you, they will do anything you ask. Not so different from people, really. Is that your philosophy for everything?" "Pretty much." He secured the last shoe and released the stallion's hoof. "Build trust. Be consistent. Do not make promises you cannot keep. Seems like a decent way to live." "And has it worked for you?" He looked at her with warmth in his creek water eyes. "It brought me here, did it not?" Their relationship deepened as naturally as their working partnership. Jacob had been right that first day when he said Sarah was beautiful at the forge, and he told her so regularly, seeming to delight in making her blush. But he also noticed other things. He brought her water when she forgot to drink. He made sure she ate lunch instead of working through it. He rubbed her shoulders when they ached from hours at the anvil. And Sarah, who had spent so long taking care of everything and everyone else, found herself being cared for in return. It was uncomfortable at first, her independent streak bristling at anything that felt like coddling. But Jacob had a way of making care feel like respect rather than pity, supporting her instead of trying to save her. "I am not trying to take over," he said when she snapped at him for suggesting she take a break one afternoon. "I am trying to work with you. There is a difference." She sighed, setting down her hammer. "I know, I am sorry. I am not used to anyone helping. It is hard for me to accept it sometimes." "That is all right. I can be patient. Just maybe try to remember that letting me help is not the same as being weak or giving up control. It is just being partners." "You are right. I will try to remember that." He kissed her forehead. "That is all I ask." In the evenings after the shop closed and they had eaten dinner with Thomas, Sarah and Jacob would walk through the town together. Tombstone was a rough place, still wild with the energy of the silver boom that had created it, but it had moments of beauty too. The way the light hit the buildings at sunset, the sound of piano music drifting from the saloons, the vast expanse of stars unobstructed by city lights. "Do you miss it?" Sarah asked one night as they walked. "The cattle drives, the traveling, the freedom of the open range?" Jacob considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss parts of it. The stars look different when you are sleeping under them every night, and there is something about being on horseback with a herd, being part of something that big and wild. But I do not miss the loneliness. I do not miss never having anywhere to call home. And I do not miss not having you, even though we have only known each other for a few weeks. Sarah, some people spend years together and never really know each other. And some people meet and just fit, like pieces that were always meant to go together. I think we are the second kind." He took her hand. "Does it worry you that things are moving fast?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "I keep thinking I should be more cautious. But then I look at you, and I think about how much better everything is since you arrived, and caution seems less important than not missing something good." "That is how I feel too." They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Sarah said, "People are talking, about us, about you living at the shop. Does that bother you?" "Not as much as I thought it would. Let them talk. We know the truth of what we are to each other." "And what are we to each other, Sarah?" She stopped walking and turned to face him, the night air cool on her skin. "I think you are the person I have been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. I think you are my partner in work and in life. And I think I am falling in love with you." Jacob's face transformed with joy. "I think I fell in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that forge, too stubborn to admit you needed help. And every day since has just made me more sure." He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise, and Sarah kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling like fools, Jacob said, "So we are doing this, really doing this. We are really doing this. Good, because I have some ideas about the future, and they all involve you." As autumn crept into the Arizona desert, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain that turned the dust to mud, Sarah and Jacob's partnership continued to flourish. Thomas healed enough to return to light work, taking over the business correspondence and customer management while leaving the physical labor to his daughter and her partner. "You two have done something special here," Thomas told them one evening. "Business is better than it has been in years. We are getting customers from 3 counties away, and the quality of the work is exceptional. I am proud of what you have built." "We could not have done it without you teaching me everything you know," Sarah said. "Maybe, but you took what I taught you and made it your own. And you found someone who complements your skills instead of competing with them. That is wisdom I never taught you." Thomas smiled at Jacob. "You are good for her, son, and good for this business." I try to be, sir. Your daughter is easy to be good for. I am sitting right here, Sarah protested, but she was smiling. One October evening, as they were closing up the shop, Jacob cleared his throat nervously. I have been thinking about something, and I wanted to discuss it with you. Sarah looked up from sweeping the floor. That sounds serious. It might be, or it might be presumptuous, but I figure we promised to be honest with each other, so here it is. He set down the hammer he had been hanging up and faced her directly. I think we should get married. Sarah's heart leapt and plummeted at the same time. Jacob, hear me out before you answer. I know it has only been a few months. I know people will say it is too fast, but I'm 25 years old and I have spent the last 10 years of my life drifting and searching for something that feels right. And this here, with you, this is the first thing that has ever felt right. I love you. I want to build a life with you, and I want to do it properly, with vows and commitment, and everyone knowing that we belong to each other. I love you too, Sarah said, her voice shaking, but marriage is complicated. The shop would become yours legally. Everything I have worked for, everything Pa built, it would all be under your control if we married. I would have no legal right to any of it. Jacob's expression shifted from hopeful to understanding. You are worried I would take the shop from you. Not worried exactly, but aware. I have to be aware. A woman has to protect herself. You are right, you absolutely do. Jacob crossed the space between them and took her hands. So let me propose something different. We get married, but first, we draw up papers with a lawyer. Papers that state clearly that the business belongs to you no matter what. That if anything happens to me or if I turn out to be a bastard who tries to take what is yours, the shop stays yours. We can make it legal and binding, and we can do it before we say any vows. Sarah stared at him. You would do that? Put it in writing that you have no claim to the business? Sarah, I am not here for the shop. I am here for you. If you want ironclad guarantees that I cannot take advantage of you, then we get those guarantees. Your security and your peace of mind are more important to me than any legal rights I might have as a husband. He squeezed her hands gently. I want to marry you because I love you and want to spend my life with you. The shop is important because it matters to you, not because I want to own it. If you need proof of that in legal documents, then we get legal documents. She felt tears prick her eyes. You would really do that? I really would. Whatever it takes for you to feel safe marrying me, that is what we will do. Sarah thought about the months they had spent working together, how Jacob had never once tried to take over or diminish her role, how he consistently deferred to her expertise, called her the master blacksmith when talking to customers, made sure everyone knew this was her business, how he had kept every promise he had made, big and small. Yes, she said. Jacob blinked. Yes? Yes, I will marry you. And yes, we will get the legal papers drawn up first because that is smart and protects both of us. But yes, Jacob Tanner, I want to marry you. His whoop of joy echoed through the shop as he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her with such happiness that Sarah felt it radiate through her entire body. When? He asked breathlessly. How soon can we do this? We need to talk to a lawyer first, and then we should probably talk to my father, make sure he is all right with this. Your father already gave me his blessing. Sarah pulled back to look at him. What? I asked him last week. Wanted to make sure he was comfortable with the idea before I proposed to you. Jacob grinned. He said it was about time I made an honest woman of you, whatever that means. It means this town has been gossiping about us living under the same roof for months. Then let us give them something better to gossip about. A wedding. They went upstairs to tell Thomas, who received the news with satisfaction and not even a hint of surprise. I was wondering when you would get around to it, he said, hugging his daughter. Welcome to the family officially, Jacob. Thank you, sir, for your blessing and for raising such an incredible woman. She gets that from her mother. Thomas settled back into his chair. Now about this business with the legal papers. That is smart thinking. I want Sarah protected too. We will go see Lawyer Henderson tomorrow, get everything set up proper. True to their word, Sarah and Jacob visited the lawyer the next day. Henderson was an older gentleman who had been practicing law in Arizona since before Tombstone existed, and he listened carefully to their requirements. "This is unusual," Henderson said when they had finished explaining, "but not unheard of, and frankly, it shows good sense on both your parts. I can draw up a document that states the blacksmith business, including the building, equipment, and all assets, remains the sole property of Sarah Mitchell, regardless of marital status. Jacob Tanner will have no claim to the business except as an employee or partner at Sarah's discretion. If the marriage ends for any reason, or if Jacob predeceases Sarah, the business remains entirely hers." "And if Sarah predeceases me?" Jacob asked quietly. Henderson looked at Sarah. "What would you want in that circumstance?" Sarah thought about it. "If I die, I want the business to go to my father during his lifetime. After he passes, then it can go to Jacob if he wants it, or to any children we might have." "That is fair," Jacob agreed. "Very well, I will have the papers drawn up within 3 days. Both of you will need to sign, along with witnesses. Once it is filed with the county, it becomes legally binding." Henderson smiled at them. "I have to say, this is refreshing. Too many young people rush into marriage without thinking about the practical aspects. You two are being smart." 3 days later, with the document signed and filed, Sarah and Jacob stood before Reverend Matthews in the small church at the edge of town. Sarah wore a new dress that Maria Rodriguez had helped her make, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar. Jacob had bought a new shirt and had his hair trimmed at the barber. Thomas stood beside Sarah, beaming with pride, while Maria served as witness. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Jacob's voice was steady as he promised to love and honor Sarah for the rest of his life. Sarah's hands only shook slightly as she made the same promises, looking into the creek water eyes of the man who had walked into her forge just 5 months ago and changed everything. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed her with such tenderness that Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I love you, Mrs. Tanner," Jacob whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Tanner." She smiled through her tears. "Though at work, I am still keeping my name. Mitchell and Son Blacksmith has been the name for 30 years. Mitchell and Son still works. I am a son now, even if it is a son-in-law." He kissed her again. "You can call yourself whatever you want as long as I get to call you my wife." The celebration was small but joyful. Maria had prepared a feast at her boarding house, and half the town showed up to wish the newlyweds well. Old Pete Harrison made a speech about how he knew from the start that the cowboy was going to stick around. The Callahan brothers, owners of the ranch Sarah had been filling that order for the day Jacob arrived, gave them a generous gift of cash and a promise of continued business. Even some of the women who had previously looked down on Sarah for her unconventional occupation came to offer congratulations and carefully worded approval. "I suppose if you had to work a trade, at least you found a good man who understands it," Mrs. Pritchard from the general store said, which was probably the closest thing to a blessing Sarah was going to get from the town's self-appointed moral authority. As the evening wore on and the guests finally departed, Jacob and Sarah walked back to the shop that was now officially their home. Thomas had discreetly mentioned that he would be spending the night at Maria's boarding house, giving the newlyweds their privacy. "How does it feel to be a married woman?" Jacob asked as they climbed the stairs to Sarah's room, which was now their room. "Terrifying and wonderful and right all at the same time." She stopped at the door and turned to face him. "I never thought I would have this, a partner who respects me. Love that does not require me to give up who I am. Someone who sees my work as valuable instead of shameful." "Your work is extraordinary. You are extraordinary." Jacob cupped her face in his hands. "And I am the luckiest man in Arizona territory." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, all nervousness giving way to trust and love. And later, lying in Jacob's arms with her head on his chest, Sarah thought that maybe taking chances on good things was the bravest and best thing she had ever done. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they were good years. The business continued to thrive under Sarah and Jacob's partnership. Thomas eventually recovered enough to do light forge work again, mostly teaching and supervising while the younger generation handled the heaviest labor. They hired a young man named Danny Chen as an apprentice when the workload grew too much, even for 3 people. And Danny proved to be a quick learner with a natural talent for decorative ironwork. "You are building something that will last," Thomas told Sarah on her 23rd birthday. "A real legacy. Your mother would be so proud." Sarah looked around the expanded shop, which now took up twice the space it had when Jacob first arrived. "I hope so. This is what I wanted. To keep your dream alive and growing." "It stopped being just my dream a long time ago, girl. This is yours now. Yours and Jacob's." A year into their marriage, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The news brought joy and terror in equal measure. How would she manage the forge while carrying a child? What if something went wrong? But Jacob held her close and promised they would figure it out together, and Thomas hired additional help to ease the workload on his daughter. Their son was born in April of 1884, a healthy boy with his father's green-gray eyes and his mother's determined chin. They named him Thomas Jacob, after both his grandfather and father, and called him Tommy for short. Sarah had worried that having a baby would force her away from the forge, but she found ways to make it work. She brought Tommy to the shop in a cradle, working while he napped, nursing him during slower periods. Jacob took over even more of the heavy work, insisting that Sarah focus on the detail work and the baby. "I never want you to have to choose between being a mother and being a blacksmith," Jacob told her. "You can be both. We will make sure of it." And they did. As Tommy grew from infant to toddler to little boy, he became as much a fixture of the shop as the anvil and forge. He played with scraps of metal while his parents worked, learning to respect the danger of the fire and the tools. By the time he was 5, he was already showing interest in the craft, asking questions about how things were made. "He is going to be a blacksmith like his mama," Thomas said proudly. "Or maybe something else entirely," Sarah countered. "Whatever he wants to be, we will support him." 2 years after Tommy was born, a daughter arrived. They named her Elizabeth, after Sarah's mother, and she proved to be as fierce and determined as her namesake. Where Tommy was cautious and thoughtful, Elizabeth was bold and quick to action. She kept her parents on their toes from the moment she could crawl. "She is definitely your daughter," Jacob said, chasing Elizabeth as she made a break for the forge at 18 months old, absolutely fearless and completely stubborn. "She is your daughter too, which means she is also charming enough to get away with anything." Sarah scooped up her daughter and kissed her dark curls. "We are in so much trouble when she gets older." Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The shop remained successful, their reputation spreading throughout Arizona and into neighboring territories. Customers came from as far as New Mexico to have work done by the Mitchell Forge. Sarah's skill had become legendary, particularly her decorative work, and she received commissions for ornamental gates and custom metalwork that commanded premium prices. Jacob never lost his way with horses, and that became his specialty within the business. He was known throughout the territory as the man to see for difficult horses that no one else could shoe. He was patient and calm, able to gentle even the most fractious animals, and owners paid well for his expertise. Thomas lived to see his grandchildren grow, his pride in what his daughter had built evident in everything he said and did. When he passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, it was with the knowledge that his legacy was secure in Sarah's capable hands. "He was so proud of you," Jacob told Sarah as they stood beside the grave. "Every day he would tell me how amazing you are, how you exceeded every hope he ever had. I just wanted to make him happy, to prove that teaching me the trade was not a mistake." "It was never a mistake. You were always meant for this." Jacob put his arm around her shoulders as their children stood quietly nearby, Tommy now 12 and Elizabeth 10. And he knew that. He died happy, Sarah. That is all any of us can hope for. Time moved forward as it always did. Tommy did indeed choose to become a blacksmith, apprenticing officially with his mother when he turned 14. He had her eye for detail and his father's strength, and together they made a formidable team. Elizabeth, true to her independent nature, declared at 15 that she wanted to be a doctor, and Sarah and Jacob supported her ambition even though it meant sending her away to school in San Francisco. "She is going to do incredible things, Minker," Sarah said, watching the stagecoach carry her daughter away toward her future. "She gets that from her mother," Jacob replied, his arm around Sarah's waist. "Both our children do." On their 20th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Jacob stood in the forge together, working side by side as they had for 2 decades. The shop had changed and grown, but the essential nature of it remained the same. The anvil rang under the hammer, the forge glowed hot and bright, the smell of hot metal and coal smoke hung in the air. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked, examining a horseshoe Jacob had just shaped. "Giving up the cattle drives, the freedom of the range to stay here and do this?" Jacob set down his hammer and pulled her close, despite the heat and the soot and the sweat. "Not once, not ever. This is exactly where I am supposed to be, with you, building this life, doing this work. I have never regretted choosing you, Sarah. Not from the moment I walked into this shop 20 years ago and saw you standing there with your blistered hands, too stubborn to quit. I probably would have collapsed if you had not helped me that day. Maybe. Or maybe you would have kept going somehow because that is who you are, but I'm glad I was there. I'm glad I got to wrap your hands and finish those horseshoes with you, because that was the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah kissed him, tasting salt and smoke, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. 20 years, 2 children, countless horseshoes and tools and custom pieces, a business that had grown beyond anything she imagined. And through it all, this man beside her, steady and true. "I love you, Jacob Tanner." "I love you too, Sarah Tanner," or Sarah Mitchell, or whatever you want to call yourself. "You are mine and I am yours, and that is all that matters." They returned to their work, the rhythm of the forge as natural as breathing, the partnership they had built in iron and love stronger than any metal they could shape. Outside, Tombstone continued to bustle with life, the Wild West slowly giving way to something more settled and civilized. But inside the Mitchell and Son blacksmith shop, some things remained constant. The heat of the forge, the ring of the anvil, and the love between a woman who had been forging horseshoes with blistered palms all day and the cowboy who had wrapped her hands and finished the work, staying not just for a few days but for a lifetime. Years continued to pass in the way they do, marking time with birthdays and anniversaries, with seasons changing and children growing. Tommy married at 23, bringing a kind young woman named Clara into the family. She had grown up on a ranch and understood the demands of the blacksmith trade, supporting her husband's work just as Jacob had always supported Sarah's. They gave Sarah and Jacob their first grandchild, a boy they named Jacob Thomas, continuing the family tradition of honoring those who came before. Elizabeth finished her medical training in San Francisco and returned to Arizona, setting up practice in Tucson. She married a fellow doctor, a quiet man named Robert Chen, who happened to be the older brother of Danny, the apprentice who had worked for the Mitchell Forge years before. The connection pleased Sarah, who liked the idea of their family circles intertwining in unexpected ways. "Life has a way of bringing people together who are meant to be together," Sarah told Elizabeth at her wedding. "Your father walked into my shop when I needed him most, and I think Robert came into your life exactly when you needed him too." "I think you might be right, Mama." Elizabeth hugged her mother tightly. "Thank you for showing me that women can be anything they want to be, that we do not have to choose between our work and our lives. You made me believe I could be a doctor and a wife and someday a mother, all at the same time." "You can be anything, sweetheart. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The blacksmith shop continued to evolve with the times. As the automobile began to make occasional appearances in Arizona, the demand for horseshoes slowly declined, but the need for skilled metalwork remained constant. Sarah adapted, taking on more ornamental ironwork, custom tools, and repair jobs for the new machinery that was becoming common. Tommy proved to have a talent for understanding the mechanical aspects of the new equipment, able to repair engines and farm machinery with the same precision his mother brought to traditional blacksmithing. "The craft is not dying," Sarah told Jacob one evening, as they sat on the porch of the house they had built behind the shop. "It is just changing, adapting. That is what we have always done." Jacob, now in his mid-50s with silver threading through his dark hair, nodded in agreement. "You have never been afraid of change? That is one of the things I have always loved about you. You honor tradition without being trapped by it." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, her own hair showing streaks of gray. "I had a good teacher in adaptability. You gave up your whole way of life to stay here with me. And I have never regretted it, not once." He kissed the top of her head. "This life we built together, it is more than I ever dreamed of having. The business, our children, the grandchildren, growing old with you, all of it." "We are not that old yet," Sarah protested, but she was smiling. "Old enough to appreciate what we have. Young enough to enjoy it for many years to come." They sat together in the cooling desert evening, watching the stars emerge one by one, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. 40 years had passed since that hot July day when Jacob first walked into the forge. 40 years of work and love, challenges and triumphs, ordinary days that added up to an extraordinary life. The shop that had once been Thomas Mitchell's dream and then Sarah's responsibility had become a true family legacy. Tommy ran the day-to-day operations now, with Sarah and Jacob serving as advisors and master craftspeople. They still worked when they wanted to, when interesting projects came in that captured their interest, but the grinding necessity of keeping the business afloat had long since passed. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What is that?" "That day you walked in when my hands were so torn up I could barely hold a hammer. What would have happened if you had not stopped to help? If you had just taken your mare somewhere else for shoes?" Jacob considered the question seriously. "I think you would have kept going somehow, found a way to make it work, because that is who you are. But it would have been harder and lonelier. I think we would have found each other eventually, even if not that day. Some things are meant to be." "You believe in fate now? That is new." "Not fate exactly, but I believe some people are meant to be in each other's lives, that the right people show up at the right time if we are paying attention." She turned to look at him, studying the face she knew as well as her own. "You were the right person at the right time, and every day since has proven that to be true." "You are going to make an old cowboy cry," Jacob said, but his eyes were already suspiciously bright. "Good. You have made me cry happy tears plenty of times over the years. Your turn." They sat together until the temperature dropped and the stars filled the sky completely, then went inside to the home they had made together, to the bed they had shared for 40 years, to the life that had exceeded both their dreams. As Sarah drifted off to sleep that night, Jacob's arm around her waist and his breathing steady in her ear, she thought about the girl she had been at 20, alone and desperate, working herself to the bone with blistered palms, too proud to ask for help. And she thought about the woman she had become, shaped by love and partnership, by the work of her hands and the family she had built. She had been forging horseshoes with blistered palms all day, and the cowboy had wrapped her hands and finished the work. But more than that, he had stayed. He had chosen her and the life they could build together over everything else. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift anyone could give another person, the freedom to be fully herself while being fully loved. The morning sun had barely started to paint the Arizona sky with shades of pink and gold when Sarah woke, as she had for most of her life, with the instinctive knowledge that there was work to be done. But now, at 60 years old, she allowed herself the luxury of lingering in bed for a few extra minutes, savoring the warmth and the presence of her husband beside her. Jacob stirred, sensing her wakefulness, and pulled her closer. "Morning already?" "It is, though we do not have to rush. Tommy opened the shop an hour ago." The luxury of having competent children. Jacob kissed her shoulder. What do you want to do today? I thought I might work on that commission for the hotel in Phoenix, the decorative railing for their grand staircase. It is an interesting challenge. Your decorative work has always been my favorite thing to watch. The way you can take a piece of iron and turn it into something beautiful, it is like magic. Sarah laughed softly. Not magic, just practice and patience. Looks like magic to me? They rose and dressed, moving through the morning routine that had become second nature over the decades. Jacob made coffee while Sarah checked on the henhouse and gathered eggs. They ate breakfast together on the porch, watching the town wake up around them, before heading to the shop where Tommy was already hard at work on a set of custom tools for one of the mining operations. Morning, Ma, Pa, Tommy called out, not pausing in his work. At 36, he had grown into a man who reminded Sarah of her father, solid and dependable and skilled at his craft. That order from the railroad came in early. They need 20 reinforced brackets by the end of the week. I can start on those this afternoon, Jacob offered, after Sarah schools me on proper decorative technique for an hour or so. Sarah smiled at the familiar teasing. Jacob had never developed her talent for decorative work, and he freely admitted it, preferring the straightforward utility of horseshoes and tools and structural pieces. But he liked to watch her work, and she liked having him nearby, so most days they ended up working side by side even when their projects were different. The morning passed in the comfortable rhythm of productive work. Sarah lost herself in the careful shaping of iron into flowing curves that would become the railing, heating and bending and hammering until the metal took the form she envisioned. Jacob worked on the railroad brackets, his strikes steady and sure, occasionally offering observations or asking questions just to hear her thoughts. Around midday, a stranger rode into town on a tired horse, making straight for the blacksmith shop. He was young, maybe 20, with the dusty clothes and sun-darkened skin of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. He reminded Sarah so much of Jacob at that age that she felt a strange sense of déjà vu. "Excuse me, ma'am," the young man said, removing his hat politely. "I am looking for work. Heard this was a good shop, wondered if you might need an extra hand." Sarah exchanged a glance with Jacob, who had set down his hammer to listen. "We have a full crew right now," Sarah said gently, "but there are other shops in the territory that might be hiring." "I understand. Thank you anyway." The young man started to turn away, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something, though? How did you learn the trade? Not many women blacksmiths around." "My father taught me when I was young. He believed I should have a skill that could support me no matter what life brought." "That is good thinking." The young man shifted his weight. "I'm trying to learn everything I can. Been working ranches, but I want to know more than just cattle. Figure a man who can work with his hands will always find a way to make a living." Something in his earnest determination reminded Sarah so strongly of Jacob that she found herself saying, "Where are you headed from here?" "Nowhere particular. Just looking for the next opportunity." Sarah looked at Jacob again, and he gave her the slight nod that meant he was thinking the same thing she was. "What is your name, son?" "Matthew Turner, ma'am." "Well, Matthew Turner, we do not have a formal position open, but we could use some help with the heavy hauling and general labor around here. It would not be smithing work at first, just helping keep things running smooth. But if you are serious about learning, you could watch and ask questions. No promises about formal training, but you would be around the craft." Matthew's face lit up. "I would be grateful for anything, ma'am. I am a hard worker, I promise." "I believe you." Sarah smiled at Jacob, remembering another young man who had promised the same thing 40 years ago. "Tommy, show Matthew where he can stable his horse and get him set up with the basics. We will try this out for a week and see how it goes." As Tommy led Matthew away, Jacob moved to stand beside Sarah. "You are thinking what I am thinking? That he reminds me of you?" "Yes." "That maybe he needs a chance the way I needed a chance?" "That too." Sarah leaned against him. "And maybe we are old enough now to pay forward some of the luck we have had." "We were lucky, were we not?" "The luckiest." Matthew proved himself over the following days, working hard without complaint and watching everything the Smiths did with hungry attention. He reminded Sarah not just of Jacob, but of herself at a young age. Driven by the need to learn and prove himself, after 2 weeks she started letting him try simple tasks under supervision, and he proved to have natural talent and good instincts. He could be good at this if someone teaches him properly, Tommy observed. We could use another trained smith eventually when Clara and I have children and I need more flexibility. So Matthew stayed, transitioning from general labor to apprentice, learning the craft the same way Sarah had once learned it from her father. And watching him progress, Sarah felt the satisfaction of knowing that the tradition would continue, that the skills and knowledge she and Jacob had built on would be passed to another generation. More years flowed past, marked by the milestones of an established life. Tommy and Clara had 3 children, keeping the Mitchell name and the family legacy alive. Elizabeth and Robert had 2 daughters, both of whom showed signs of inheriting their mother's sharp intellect and determination. The grandchildren grew up playing in the forge yard, learning to respect the work and the craft, just as Tommy and Elizabeth had before them. Sarah and Jacob settled into their later years with grace and gratitude. They still worked when they wanted to, still shaped metal and solved problems and created beautiful things. But they also took time to travel, visiting Elizabeth in Tucson and taking a trip to Colorado to see the places where Jacob had grown up. They spent evenings reading together on the porch, telling stories to their grandchildren, watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" Sarah asked Jacob one evening as they sat in their usual spots, her head on his shoulder. "I said I needed 4 shoes for my mare." "No, the first real thing, after you saw my hands?" Jacob thought for a moment, then smiled. "I said your hands were torn up something fierce. And then you asked when I last wrapped them properly, like it was the most natural thing in the world to care about a stranger's injured hands. It was the natural thing to do. You were hurting, and I could help. Simple as that." "Nothing about you is simple, Jacob Tanner. You are the most complicated, wonderful, stubborn, kind man I have ever known, and I have loved you for 43 years. 43 years, 4 months, and 18 days, Jacob corrected. "But who is counting?" Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet evening. "Apparently you are. I count every day with you as a blessing. Why would I not keep track?" They sat together as they had countless times before, comfortable in the life they had built, secure in the love they had nurtured through decades of ordinary days and extraordinary moments. The forge stood quiet now, the fire banked for the night, but it would burn bright again tomorrow. The work would continue, the craft would endure, and in the morning Sarah would wake beside the man who had walked into her forge when she needed him most, who had wrapped her blistered hands with gentle care, who had chosen to stay when he could have left, who had loved her through every challenge and triumph that life had brought. She had been forging horseshoes with blistered palms all day, alone and exhausted and determined. The cowboy had wrapped her hands and finished the work. But more than that, so much more than that, he had seen who she was at her core and loved that person without reservation or condition. He had become her partner in every sense of the word, building a life and a legacy that would outlast them both. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Sarah thought about the generations that would come after them. Tommy's children and Elizabeth's children, and the children they would have in turn. The Mitchell Forge would continue, adapting and evolving with the times as it always had, carried forward by people who understood that honest work and genuine love were the foundations of any life worth living. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked softly. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky we have been, how grateful I am that you needed horseshoes that particular day." "I did not really need shoes that urgently," Jacob admitted. "My mare could have gone another week easily." Sarah sat up to look at him. "What?" "I saw you through the open door while I was riding past. Saw you working alone, looking exhausted, and something just pulled me to stop. The shoes were an excuse." He smiled at her surprised expression. I have never told you that before because it seemed like maybe fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it was involved, like I was meant to see you that day and meant to stop. You are telling me that all of this, our entire life together, started because you made up a reason to come into my shop? I am telling you that I took one look at you and knew I had to meet you. The rest just happened naturally from there. Jacob cupped her face gently. I could say I wish I had been completely honest from the start, but I'm not sure you would have let me help if I had not had a legitimate business reason for being there. Sarah thought about the woman she had been that day, proud and stubborn and reluctant to accept help from anyone. You are probably right. I would have sent you away. Instead, I got to wrap your hands and finish those horseshoes with you, and that was the beginning of the greatest adventure of my life. Mine too. Sarah kissed him softly. Even if it started with a lie about needing horseshoes. Small omission, not really a lie, Jacob protested, but he was grinning. Cowboy logic. The best kind. They returned to their comfortable position, wrapped in each other and in the gathering darkness. And Sarah thought that regardless of how it started, their story had become exactly what it was meant to be. A partnership forged in fire and strengthened over time. A love that had weathered everything life threw at it and emerged stronger for the testing. When they finally went inside for the night, Sarah paused at the door of the shop, looking back at the anvil and forge that had been the center of her life for so long. The metal gleamed in the moonlight, tools hung in their proper places, everything ready for another day of work. It was beautiful in its functionality, in its purpose, in the history it represented. Come on, Jacob said, taking her hand. The forge will be there in the morning. I know. I was just thinking about how much has happened in this space, how many horseshoes forged, how many tools made, how many problems solved, how much life has been lived here. And how much more life there is still to live. This is not an ending, Sarah. This is just another evening in a long line of evenings with many more to come. He was right, of course. There would be more mornings of work, more customers with problems to solve, more grandchildren to teach, more sunsets to watch together. The story did not end just because they had been telling it for decades. It continued, enriched by memory and experience, deepened by time. In bed that night, wrapped in Jacob's arms as she had been for 43 years, Sarah felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. This was what happiness looked like. Not a single perfect moment, but thousands of ordinary moments strung together into a life, working side by side, raising children, building a business, growing old together, finding reasons to smile every single day. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Jacob whispered back. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that, until there are no more days. That is a long time. Not nearly long enough. Sarah smiled against his chest and let herself drift into sleep, secure in the knowledge that when morning came, Jacob would be there beside her. They would rise and work and live another day of the life they had built together. And it would be enough. More than enough. It would be everything. The seasons turned as they always did, and Sarah and Jacob continued their dance through life with the grace of long practice. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, the shop decorated with flowers and the whole town turning out for the party. Maria Rodriguez, now in her 90s and still spry, declared it the greatest love story Tombstone had ever seen. 50 years, and they still look at each other like newlyweds, Maria said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. That is what real love looks like. 50 years and he still makes me smile every single day, Sarah agreed, watching Jacob dance with their youngest granddaughter, his white hair gleaming in the lamplight. I could not have asked for a better partner. More time passed, measured in birthdays and holidays and quiet days at the forge. Sarah's hands, which had once been torn and blistered, now showed the marks of a lifetime of work. Calluses and scars, joints that ached on cold mornings but still capable and strong. Jacob's strength had faded somewhat from his youth, but his hands remained steady and his skill undiminished. They were both in their 70s when Tommy sat them down for a serious conversation. "I think it is time we talked about the future," he said carefully. "About when you might want to retire fully and let me buy out your share of the business." Sarah and Jacob exchanged glances. They had known this conversation was coming eventually, but hearing it stated so directly still felt strange. "We are not dead yet, son," Jacob said mildly. "We can still contribute." "I know you can, but you should not have to. You have been working since you were children. You deserve to rest, to enjoy your later years without the pressure of keeping a business running." Tommy looked between his parents. "I have the money saved. The business is successful enough to support the buyout, and I have Matthew ready to become a full partner once you are ready to step back." Sarah thought about the shop, about the years of her life she had poured into it. The thought of walking away completely was harder than she expected. "We would still want to come by sometimes. Do special projects when something interesting comes in." "Of course. This will always be your shop as much as mine. But you would not have to be here every day. You could travel more, spend time with Elizabeth and the grandchildren, do whatever you want without worrying about orders and customers and keeping the business afloat." It was a generous offer, and a sensible one. Sarah was 72 years old. She had earned the right to rest. But still, the idea of not working the forge regularly felt like losing a piece of herself. "What do you think?" she asked Jacob. "I think our son is right. I think we have built something strong enough to pass on, and it is time to trust the next generation to carry it forward." Jacob squeezed her hand. "And I think there are things I would like to do with you that we have put off for too long. See more of the country, spend lazy mornings in bed, read books just because we feel like it." "We could still do special projects," Sarah confirmed. "Anytime you want," Tommy promised. "I just do not want you to feel like you have to be here, like the business will fail without you. It will not. You taught me too well for that." So they agreed, signing papers that transferred full ownership of the Mitchell & Son blacksmith shop to Tommy, with Matthew becoming a junior partner. The transaction was completed by the end of summer, and Sarah found herself walking away from the daily grind of forge work for the first time in her life. It was disorienting at first, not having a schedule that revolved around customer orders and forge temperatures. But slowly, Sarah adjusted to the new rhythm of her days. She discovered she enjoyed having time to visit with friends, to tend a garden, to take afternoon naps when her bones were tired. She and Jacob took a train to San Francisco to visit Elizabeth, marveling at the ocean and the hills and the bustling city life that was so different from their desert home. "Is it strange not working every day?" Elizabeth asked her mother during their visit. "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "I miss the rhythm of it, the satisfaction of making something with my hands. But I also like having time to just be, to spend whole days with your father without worrying about what needs to be forged tomorrow. You two are still sickeningly in love, are you not?" "We are." "Is that sickening?" "Only in the best possible way." Elizabeth hugged her mother. "You and Papa, you showed me what a real partnership looks like, what it means to support each other without losing yourself. I use that model in my own marriage every day." Back in Tombstone, Sarah and Jacob settled into their retirement with contentment. They still visited the shop regularly, taking on occasional projects that interested them. Sarah crafted an elaborate gate for the new park the town was building, her final major commission, and one that would bear her name for generations. Jacob helped Matthew train a new apprentice, passing on the knowledge he had accumulated over decades. On a warm evening in late September, nearly 55 years after Jacob had first walked into the Mitchell forge, he and Sarah sat on their porch as they had countless times before. But this time Jacob was moving slower, his breathing slightly labored, in a way that worried Sarah. "Are you feeling all right?" she asked, studying his face with concern. "I am fine. Just old." Jacob smiled at her. "We are both getting old, love. That is what happens when you are lucky enough to live a long life." "I do not like thinking about getting old." "Why not? We have earned every one of these years. Every gray hair, every ache and pain, it is proof that we lived fully and well. He reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his 77 years. I have no regrets, Sarah, not a single one. Every day with you has been exactly what I needed. Even the hard days, the arguments, the times when money was tight or we did not know how we would make everything work, especially those days, because we faced them together and came out stronger. That is what a good partnership does. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the desert cooling around them. Sarah studied their joined hands, hers weathered and scarred from decades at the forge, his calloused and steady, still able to gentle a nervous horse or shape iron with confidence. "Do you remember the first time you kissed me?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Of course. You had just agreed to let me stay and help at the shop. We were standing there covered in soot and sweat, and you looked at me like I was the answer to a question you did not know you had been asking. You were the answer to so many questions. And you were the reason I finally stopped drifting, the reason I found home." Jacob lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who needed horseshoes he did not really need." Sarah laughed through sudden tears. "Thank you for wrapping my hands and finishing the work, and for staying, always for staying." As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Sarah leaned her head on Jacob's shoulder and thought about the incredible journey their lives had taken. From that desperate day when she had been alone and exhausted with blistered palms to this moment of contentment and completion. It had been a beautiful ride, full of work and love and purpose. "No regrets?" Jacob asked softly, echoing her earlier question. "Not a single one." "Good. That is all I ever wanted. For you to be happy, for us to build something meaningful together." We did. We absolutely did. They sat together until the temperature dropped and the stars filled the sky completely, then went inside to their home, to their bed, to the life they had shared for more than half a century. And in the morning they would wake together once more, grateful for another day, another moment, another chance to love and be loved in return. Because Sarah had been forging horseshoes with blistered palms all day, alone and desperate and determined not to fail, and the cowboy had wrapped her hands with gentle care and finished the work beside her, seeing not weakness but strength, not someone to be saved but someone to stand alongside. He had stayed not out of obligation but out of love, building a partnership that had endured through every challenge and triumph that life could offer. It was a simple beginning to an extraordinary story. And as Sarah drifted off to sleep that night, Jacob's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she knew with absolute certainty that she would make every single choice exactly the same if given the chance to live it all again. Because this life, this love, this partnership forged in fire and strengthened by time had been worth every moment, every struggle, every blistered palm and wrapped hand and horseshoe completed together. Their story was not just about survival or even success. It was about two people who found each other when they needed it most and chose every single day to keep choosing each other. That was the real magic, the real triumph. Not the work they had done or the business they had built, but the love they had nurtured into something unbreakable and eternal. And in the forge that still stood strong after all these years, the anvil waited patiently for the next generation to take up the hammer and continue the tradition. The fire would burn bright again, the iron would be shaped and formed, the craft would endure. But the greatest legacy Sarah and Jacob left behind was not made of metal at all. It was made of love and partnership, of respect and devotion, of two souls who had found each other in a dusty blacksmith shop in Arizona and built a life together that would inspire generations to come. This was their story, complete and perfect, a testament to the power of helping hands and open hearts, of taking chances and keeping promises, of blistered palms wrapped with care and horseshoes forged together in the heat and dust of the Old West.